Have you ever actually witnessed the terrifying moment a performer takes their final breath right there on the stage? It might sound like something ripped straight out of a nightmare, but the truth is, it has happened far more often than you would ever imagine. Today, we are going to present you with 31 real heartbreaking cases of live performances that ended in absolute tragedy. Moments where the glittering spectacle suddenly turned into a final farewell. You might be surprised to recognize how many of these famous names left a mark on your life before they said their very last goodbye. Let's start with Steve Irwin, who for years defied all logic. He got up close and personal with massive crocodiles, lethal snakes, and terrifying sharks, always doing it with that infectious smile and a loud shout of pure enthusiasm. Steve Irwin was not just a television presenter. He was a veritable force of nature, but sadly, even the wildest forces on Earth can be stopped dead in their tracks by a completely unexpected twist of destiny. It was September 4th, 2006. Steve was out at the Great Barrier Reef busy filming for the documentary titled Ocean's Deadliest. He was truly in his element surrounded by dangerous and unpredictable marine life, but it wasn't a shark or a sea snake that ended his life that day. It was a creature that rarely ever attacks humans, a stingray. While he was snorkeling, Steve drifted close to a massive stingray spanning 2.5 meters. Without any provocation, and with zero warning, the animal's tail whipped up like a jagged spear and drove straight into his chest. The venomous barb pierced right through his heart. His crew, paralyzed somewhere between panic and utter disbelief, tried desperately to save him, but it was useless. He was only 44 years old. The camera captured the whole thing, but those images will never see the light of day out of respect for his family. The entire world wept for the crocodile hunter, a charismatic figure who lived with such bravery and died doing exactly what he loved most. His legacy in wildlife conservation and environmental education lives on, but his departure left a void that is impossible to fill in the oceans and in millions of hearts. Then there is Owen Hart. It was May 23rd, 1999. The stadium was packed, the lights were shining bright, the crowd was roaring, and millions of eyes were glued to the broadcast, watching the live WWE event over the edge. Owen Hart, the charismatic Canadian wrestler, was preparing for a spectacular entrance, planning to descend from the rafters in the ceiling all the way down to the ring, like a superhero. But the stunt designed to impress the fans turned into a deadly trap. In a matter of seconds, something went terribly wrong. The harness released prematurely and Hart fell. It wasn't slow motion. It was a brutal fraction of reality. A free fall of almost 24 meters ending with a sickening dry thud on the ring, followed by an immediate silence that took over the arena. The live broadcast quickly cut away to avoid showing the scene, but the horror had already been unleashed. He was only 34 years old, with a booming career, a loving family behind the scenes, and an entire community that was left paralyzed with shock. His death didn't just shake the heart of professional wrestling. It changed the rules of the game forever. Since that tragic night, the WWE has imposed much stricter safety measures, but no protocol will ever be able to erase the image of Owen Hart, the wrestler who literally fell for his art. Now Tiny Tim, Minneapolis. November 30th, 1996. The atmosphere was festive, filled with nostalgia and laughter. On stage stood an unmistakable figure with his eccentric suit, his falsetto voice, and his inseparable ukulele. It was Tiny Tim, the eccentric singer who once conquered the 60s with his unusual interpretation of the song Tiptoe Through the Tulips. That night, at a charity event, Tiny was doing what he always did, captivating the crowd with his endearing weirdness. But in the middle of his performance, something changed. A slight wobble, an unexpected silence. The musician collapsed right there on the stage. They rushed him to the hospital, but nothing could be done. He had suffered a massive heart attack. He was 64 years old. Tiny Tim didn't just leave behind a unique career, but also a legacy of pure authenticity. He was ridiculed by some, adored by others, but he was always genuine. His death on stage wasn't just tragic, it was symbolic. He fell exactly as he lived amidst the lights' high notes and the fixed gaze of an audience that didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Carl Walenda, San Juan, Puerto Rico, March 22nd, 1978. The sky was clear, but the wind promised no mercy. At 73 years old, Carl Walenda, the legendary tightrope walker of the Flying Walendas, was preparing for an act that defied not only gravity, but also the logic of time and age. He was going to cross a wire suspended between the towers of the Condado Plaza Hotel without a safety net. For him, it wasn't madness. It was passion, dedication, heritage. He had done it countless times before. But that day, destiny had other plans. As he was carefully walking across the wind, suddenly lashed out with incredible force. The cable jerked and shook beneath him, and Walenda's body tottered precariously. In a single instant that seemed to stretch on for an eternity, his delicate balance was lost and Carl plummeted down. There were no screams to be heard, just the sickening sound of the impact. And then followed a heavy silence that completely broke the heart of the entire circus world. The cameras were rolling and they captured every single moment of it. Although it wasn't being broadcast live at the time, the man who had boldly defied death for decades was finally caught by it. His death wasn't simply a tragedy, it served as a brutal, stark reminder of the ultimate price that performers sometimes have to pay. Those who turn danger into their daily spectacle. Barbara Weldon's in Goudron, France on July 19, 2017. It was truly a magical night at the Léo Ferré Festival. The stars were shining brightly down upon an audience that was completely hypnotized. Entranced by a voice that was both young and incredibly powerful, Barbara Weldon stood on the stage barefoot, bathed in the glow of warm, welcoming lights. She was singing as if every single note she hit was a personal confession. She was only 35 years old, yet she sang with the deep soul of someone who had already lived through 1,000 different lives. Her first album had been like a soft whisper that gradually swelled into a powerful scream. That night, she was poised to conquer even more hearts with her talent until something absolutely terrible occurred. Right in the middle of her interpretation, Barbara took one fatal false step. She unknowingly stepped directly onto a piece of defective electrical equipment. Nobody saw it coming at all. There were no flying sparks, there were no explosions, just a sudden and shocking collapse, and a silent, heavy fall onto the stage floor. The electrical discharge was instantly fatal. The medical team arrived but could do nothing to save her. The festival instantly transformed into a funeral. That voice, which was just beginning to take flight, was permanently silenced. Silenced by a failure that was absurd, invisible, and lethal. This tragedy left all of France and the world of music in deep mourning. Weldon's didn't simply lose her life that night. The world of art lost a beautiful soul that had so much more left to sing. And a haunting question remained floating there amidst the frozen applause. How many dreams can be electrocuted and extinguished in a single second? Bruce Hampton. Atlanta, May 1st, 2017. The atmosphere in the venue simply could not have been more festive. The legendary Colonel Bruce Hampton was celebrating his 70th birthday with a massive concert packed full of stars. It was truly his night, his tribute. The musicians were improvising freely. The audience was laughing. The energy in the room was pure euphoria. But not a single person imagined that this scene would turn into such an ironic and cruel trap of destiny. Right at the very climax of the spectacle, during a vibrant and energetic performance, Hampton suddenly collapsed. He fell right at the front of the stage during a guitar solo, but strangely, nobody reacted to it immediately. The audience just thought it was part of his usual theatrical act because Bruce was exactly like that eccentric. He was unpredictable, a showman with no script. The seconds ticked by. The music kept playing on. But the silence surrounding his body began to grow. Finally, someone walked over and the reality of the situation hit them with violence. It was not a joke, it was not acting, it was the end. They rushed him to the hospital, but it was already far too late. Bruce Hampton had died exactly as he had lived his life, surrounded by chords, friends, and applause. His death sent a massive shockwave through the music community, especially within the improvisation and jam band scene, where he was considered a true prophet. Aside from the 6 people we have already mentioned. Do you know of any other artist who has suffered such a tragedy while on stage? Let us know down in the comments. Pedro Henrique, Sao Paulo, Brazil, March 12, 2023. The stage was burning with intense energy. The fans were screaming, the lights were pulsing to the rhythm of the guitar, and right in the center of that musical hurricane stood Pedro Henrique, a virtuoso and an idol. His electrifying style and his completely exposed soul, poured into every note, had turned him into a revered figure within Brazilian music. That night was just one more stop in his unstoppable calendar of festivals. Pedro was giving it his absolute all, as he always did, until suddenly, right in the middle of the act, his body just collapsed. The impact was a dry thud and the silence was deafening. The audience was incredulous at first, thinking it was part of the show, but chaos did not take long to break out. Paramedics raced onto the stage, tried desperately to revive him, and rushed him to the nearest hospital. But the news arrived with the cruel speed of a tragedy. Pedro Henrique, at just 39 years of age, had died of a massive heart attack. A heart that had palpitated for the music had suddenly stopped beating, in front of a crowd that witnessed his very last chord. It was a devastating blow for his family, for his fans, and for the entire country. Valencia Prime, Philadelphia, September 12, 2022. In the deep heart of the night inside the Taboo Lounge and Sports Bar, the dance floor was vibrating to the rhythm of glamour, pride, and the strong voice of a community that never gives up. There she was, Valencia Prime, the queen of the night, the plus-size diva of Philadelphia, shining just as brightly as she always did. She was only 25 years old, yet she stood as a truly iconic figure for the local drag scene and the entire LGBTQ+ community. Her show titled Primetime was an absolute explosion of joy, freedom, and empowerment, until suddenly Valencia's body just gave out. She collapsed right there under the very spotlights that had made her shine so brilliantly so many times before. The silence was immediate and heavy. The audience initially thought it was a dramatic performance part of her unmistakable style. But this was no trick. It was a critical medical emergency. She was rushed immediately to Jefferson Hospital in a desperate attempt to save her. The diagnosis was devastating and final. Atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease had tragically stolen her young life away. Right there on the very same stage where she had gifted hope so often, the community was left completely devastated and broken. Messages of love and grief flooded social media with Taboo Lounge, describing her as a brilliant star whose light will never be forgotten. Because Valencia Prime was not just a performer, she was a powerful symbol of struggle, of visibility, and of beauty in its most authentic form. Next, we go to Costa Titch in Johannesburg. It was the 11th of March 2023. The Ultra South Africa Festival was at its absolute peak, pulsing with powerful beats, blinding strobe lights, and thousands of fans dancing to the rhythm of a rising legend. Right in the center of that explosion of energy stood Costa Titch, the South African rapper, who had conquered the world with his unique blend of hip-hop and amapiano. He was young, incredibly talented, and seemingly unstoppable. He was 28 years old with the world at his feet until something unusual happened. In the middle of his performance, Costa collapsed to the floor for the first time. The crowd held their breath, but then he stood up as if nothing was wrong. The show had to go on, or so he thought, but seconds later he fell again. This time he fell forever. The shock was instant. Medical staff rushed to the stage, but tragically there was nothing they could do. His body did not respond. His light was extinguished in front of thousands of witnesses. Although the cause of death was never officially confirmed, there was speculation about an epileptic seizure. Costa Titch was not merely a rapper. He was a symbol of cultural evolution, of raw talent, and of powerful representation. His death left South Africa in deep mourning and broke the hearts of his global fan base. He fell amidst the rhythm, but his echo in the form of music videos and memories continues to rumble on like a bass line that never dies. Now we look at KK Krishna Kumar Kunath in Kolkata. It was the 31st of May 2022. The Nazrul Mancha Auditorium was absolutely packed. Every seat and every corner vibrated with the expectation of hearing one of India's most beloved voices, KK Krishna Kumar Kunath, an artist whose music spoke every language of the heart regardless of the words he sang. His songs had accompanied entire generations through weddings, farewells, and stories of impossible love. That night was meant to be another delivery of passion and total devotion. But then, without any warning, something failed inside him. In the middle of the spectacle, he collapsed. The audience looked on in shock. A faint dizzy spell? No one wanted to think the worst. He was taken immediately to the hospital, but the verdict was final and unappealable: cardiac arrest. He was 54 years old. He died doing exactly what he loved most. His death was a sharp blow to the soul of the country, and social media was flooded with tributes. Fans, musicians, and actors all felt like they had lost a personal friend because KK didn't just sing. He caressed old wounds. He celebrated joys and gave a voice to what many did not know how to say. Now Silver King in London, May 11th, 2019. At the legendary Roundhouse venue in Camden, wrestling fanatics were living a night of nostalgia and adrenaline. Among them, one name shone with intensity: Silver King, born Cesar Barón. A Mexican idol, an international star, and a wrestler with the blood of a legend running through his veins. That night, in front of a devoted crowd, Silver King stepped into the ring to offer another spectacle of passion and skill. But what started as just another match ended in tragedy. In the heat of the confrontation, Silver King collapsed suddenly. At first, both the attendees and his colleagues thought it was part of the show. It was common in wrestling to play with drama and suspense, but this time it was real. Precious seconds ticked by before anyone noticed that something was terribly, terribly wrong. By the time medical personnel intervened, it was already too late. He was declared dead at the scene. He was 51 years old. The cause was a massive heart attack. His death shook the entire wrestling community to its core. Silver King was not just a fighter. He was an actor, a symbol, and a bridge between traditional Mexican wrestling and the global spectacle. He left without warning, without a choreographed ending. He fell in the ring like a true warrior while the whole world watched. Next, we remember Papa Wemba, Abidjan, Ivory Coast, April 24th, 2016. The Femua Music Festival was vibrating with African rhythms and an expectant crowd. Center stage stood a man of commanding elegance and a luminous soul, Papa Wemba. He was an absolute icon of African music, a true pioneer, and the undisputed emperor of Congolese rumba and soukous. At 66 years old, he was still touring the globe, preaching with rhythm, pride, and culture. That night was just another chapter in his legacy until his body finally screamed enough. The paramedics rushed in, desperately trying to revive him, but there would be no miracle that night. He passed away shortly after. The news spread like a massive seismic wave through the entire world of music. Africa wept. The whole world wept because Papa Wemba didn't just sing. He united peoples, redefining African identity with modernity, with rhythm, and with dignity. Goodbye to Gravity, Bucharest, Romania. October 30th, 2015. It was supposed to be a historic night for Romanian metal. Goodbye to Gravity was launching their new album at the Collective nightclub. It was full of youth energy and red-hot guitars. Nobody knew that they were actually dancing right on top of a deadly trap. The show started with pyrotechnics inside the venue. Sparks flew, applause erupted, and then pure horror took over. One of the flames caught the soundproofing foam on the ceiling. The fire spread at absolutely terrifying speed. In seconds, the club turned into a burning box. There were no proper exits, no effective extinguishers, and panic quickly transformed into a deadly stampede. 64 people perished, including 4 of the 5 members of the band. Mihai Alexandru Bogdan Enache, Vlad Telea, and Alex Pascu. The tragedy shook all of Romania to its core, but it wasn't just a natural tragedy. It was the result of corruption, negligence, and a culture of permissiveness that cost lives. Protests exploded in the streets, the government fell, laws were changed, but no reform will ever bring back those young artists. Goodbye to Gravity didn't just disappear into the flames. They became a symbol of a national wound of a generation screaming for justice, and of the music that burned down to wake up an entire country. Nick Menza, Los Angeles. May 21st, 2016. In a small, intimate club far away from the stadiums and massive crowds of the past, a loyal audience vibrated with every beat of the drums. On stage, Nick Menza, the former drummer of Megadeth and a living legend of thrash metal, was pounding the drums with the same fury that made him famous decades ago. He was playing with his new band OHM, smiling, sweating, living the music, until without any warning he collapsed onto his instrument. The stage that seconds before was roaring with power was suddenly filled with the silence of the grave. The paramedics tried to revive him, but it was all in vain. Nick Menza had died of a massive heart attack right in the middle of the act. He was 51 years old, and his final drum roll was also the last heartbeat of a career that defined an era of metal. With Megadeth, he participated in some of the most iconic albums the genre has ever seen. His powerful, precise, and almost surgical style elevated drumming to a completely different level. His sudden death left a void in heavy music, a muted echo on the stages where he once reigned supreme. Tommy Cooper, London. April 15th, 1984. Millions of viewers were tuned in. The British comedian and magician Tommy Cooper, famous for his absurd humor and his deliberate magic failures. He was right in the middle of a live performance on national television. The theater was packed and laughter flew like spells. Standing there with his trademark red fez and imposing figure, Tommy was cracking jokes between clumsy tricks. But then it happened. In the middle of the act, he brought his hands to his chest and slumped backward. The audience exploded in laughter. It looked like another one of his physical gags, just another joke from his repertoire, but this time the trick wasn't a trick. He didn't get up. Backstage panic broke out. The host and technicians ran to assist him while the cameras were still focused on the stage, oblivious to the tragedy unfolding. He was rushed to the nearest hospital. He died shortly after. The cause was a massive heart attack. He was 63 years old. And although he departed live before thousands, most didn't realize it until the laughter turned into silence. It was an ironic, dark, and absolutely Cooper ending. Juan Carlos Formel. New York, May 26, 2023. In a corner of the Bronx, Cuban music was sounding with incredible force. On stage, Juan Carlos Formel, bassist composer and heir to a legendary musical dynasty, was doing what he always did, enchanting everyone with every note. He was more than just a musician. He was a bridge between the classic and the contemporary, between Havana and the rest of the world. The concert was flowing with an enveloping rhythm between Latin jazz and Cuban sun. Suddenly, without announcement, without any noise, Formel collapsed on the stage. The audience was left in total shock. Some people thought it was part of the show, but the tension grew when they saw he wasn't moving. He was rushed to the hospital, but the verdict was final and devastating: a massive heart attack. He was 59 years old, and as it turned out, His very last musical note was also his final farewell to the world. His passing felt like a sharp, sudden blow right to the very center of Cuba's cultural soul. You see, Formel wasn't just a virtuoso performer. He was a sonic storyteller and an artist of true lineage, being the son of the iconic Juan Formel from the legendary group Los Van Van. His legacy was still being built, and that night in New York City was supposed to be a joyous celebration, not a mournful elegy. I honestly need a moment to cry after that. How about you? How many tissues have you gone through listening to this story so far? Let us know down in the comments. Brandon Bruce Lee, Wilmington, North Carolina. March 31st, 1993. On the set of the movie The Crow, everything seemed to be going exactly according to the script. Production was moving along smoothly, the actors were focused, and Brandon Lee, the son of the legendary Bruce Lee, was preparing to film one of the movie's most intense scenes. His character was supposed to get shot. The gun being used was in theory just a prop. No gunpowder, completely safe, or so they thought. But what absolutely nobody knew was that a fragment of a real bullet had remained lodged inside the gun's barrel from a previous scene. When the trigger was pulled with a blank charge, that lodged fragment instantly turned into a deadly projectile. And just like that, Brandon collapsed to the ground. At first, everyone thought it was just an exceptional piece of acting, but panic soon set in. He was immediately rushed to the hospital. The surgeons fought for hours to save him, but nothing worked. He died at the young age of just 28. A rising star, a promising career, and a family name loaded with history, all extinguished by an unforgivable technical error. The tragedy of Brandon Lee shook Hollywood to its core and permanently changed safety protocols on film sets everywhere. It served as a cruel reminder that even on a fictional set, death can be painfully, horribly real. And so the son of the dragon departed far too soon, leaving behind an unfinished legend and an industry forever in his debt. Mitsuharu Misawa, Hiroshima, Japan, June 13th, 2009. The atmosphere inside the arena was absolutely electric. Japanese wrestling fans were eagerly waiting for another match from their living legend, Mitsuharu Misawa, an absolute idol of puroresu and a symbol of technique, intensity, and respect. In Japan, Misawa wasn't just a wrestler, he was cultural heritage. That night, he stepped into the ring. It was a tag team match and everything seemed normal until the fatal moment arrived. His opponent lifted him up to execute a suplex, a routine move for someone like Misawa. But something went wrong. When his body hit the canvas, the mood instantly changed. He didn't move. He didn't respond. A chilling silence replaced the cheers. Medical personnel rushed the ring. The resuscitation attempts were desperate. He was taken to the hospital where he was pronounced dead. The cause was a lethal injury to his spinal cord. He was 46 years old. All of Japan was left paralyzed with shock. The entire international wrestling community mourned together as one single family. Because Misawa didn't just fight, he taught, he inspired, and he upheld a tradition of honor and absolute dedication. Sib Hashian, March 22nd, 2017. On board the Legends of Rock cruise, the sea was gently swaying and the chords of classic rock resonated across the deck. Among the honored musicians, one of the most anticipated was Sib Hashian, the legendary drummer of the band Boston. His powerful beat had given life to anthems like More Than a Feeling, a song that truly defined an era. Sib, with his unmistakable afro and unbreakable energy, took his place at the drums. The excited crowd vibrated with every beat until right in the middle of the show, the rhythm stopped. He collapsed over his instrument without any warning. Panic took over the stage. The medical teams on board the cruise ship tried to revive him, but it was useless. He was declared dead shortly after. He was 67 years old. It was known that he had faced health issues in recent months, but no one imagined that the stage would be his final refuge. His death left his bandmates, his family, and an entire generation that grew up with his rhythms marking the pulse of the 70s in total shock. Sib Hashian died exactly as he lived, making hearts vibrate from his sonic trench. And that night, the ocean carried his final drum roll to a place where not even time can erase it. Dick Shawn, San Diego, California. April 17th, 1987. At the University of California, an enthusiastic student audience applauded the arrival of Dick Shawn, a legendary actor and comedian known for his eccentric humor and unmatched stage presence. He was famous for memorable roles in classic movies like The Producers and It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. But that night the show would become unforgettable for truly chilling reasons. Right in the middle of his monologue, while his improvised style had the audience torn between laughter and amazement, Shawn delivered a punchline, pressed his hand to his chest, and fell straight to the floor. The laughter just kept going. A lot of people actually thought it was all just part of the act. It wasn't really typical of him to do unexpected physical bits off script, but as the minutes ticked by, a heavy silence began to displace the roaring laughter. He wasn't moving and he wasn't responding. He was eventually rushed to the hospital where he was pronounced dead. A heart attack. He was 63 years old. The confusion in the room was absolute. He died performing his very own unscripted finale with no cuts, a final act that forever blurred the lines between comedy and tragedy. For his fans, it felt as though reality itself had surrendered to his incredible ability to surprise everyone, even in death. Christina Grimmie, Orlando, Florida. June 10th, 2016. The night had started out absolutely perfect. Christina Grimmie, the young singer and former finalist on The Voice, had just finished an intimate concert that was charged with emotion, talent, and deep gratitude. Just like she always did, she stayed behind at the end to greet her fans, sign autographs, share hugs, and smile. She was only 22 years old. Her career was just taking off and her voice had captivated millions, but nothing in the world could prepare anyone for what was about to happen next. Out of the crowd, an armed man walked up. Without any provocation and without saying a single word, he opened fire at point-blank range. Christina fell. Her brother, in an act of absolute bravery, threw himself onto the attacker, preventing an even bigger massacre. But sadly, it was already too late. Christina didn't survive. The killer took his own life just seconds later. The venue was plunged into horror. Social media exploded with the news. The entire music industry froze in shock. How could this actually be real? How could a promising young star known for her sweetness and her light be snatched away just like that? Surrounded by the love of her fans, Christina Grimmie didn't just die from a bullet. She died because of a failure in the system, the vulnerability of young artists, and the fragility of a world where neither talent nor kindness offers any immunity. Her voice was silenced, but her echo lives on in every cover and in every fan who sings her songs with their eyes closed tight. And it lives in every tear that falls when we remember that the stage doesn't always protect its angels. Lil Hardin Armstrong, Chicago. August 27, 1971. A memorial concert in honor of the unforgettable Louis Armstrong was bringing together musicians, family members, and admirers. Among them, one figure stood out for her history and elegance, Lil Hardin Armstrong, the pianist-composer and ex-wife of the legendary trumpeter. She had shared with him not only a marriage, but the stage, the sheet music, and the growth of jazz as a universal language. That night, she sat down at the piano to pay tribute to him with the one thing that had always truly united them, the music. The first notes flowed out softly, heavy with emotion. But suddenly, right in the middle of the performance, Lil collapsed onto the keys. The sound died right there with her. The scene was frozen. She was taken to the nearest hospital where they confirmed the cause, a heart attack. She was 73 years old. Jazz had lost one of its true founding mothers. Her influence had been immense, even though it was often eclipsed by the male figures of the time. Without her, Louis Armstrong wouldn't have been the same man, and without her, jazz wouldn't have had the same rhythm or the same soul.